Good day and welcome. We'll get started at 2 minutes after the hour, top of the hour. Good day and welcome. We'll begin at 2 minutes after the top of the hour, so you still have time to get coffee or drinks or water. Good day and welcome. We'll get started at 2 minutes after the top of the hour, so you still have time to grab something to drink and stretch. Good day, and for those of you that just joined, we will begin the session at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So still have time to grab yourself a drink or a snack. Again, we'll start 2 minutes at the top of the hour. Welcome. We're glad to have you.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome. We'll begin 2 minutes after the top of the hour, so you still have time to get something to drink, stretch out, etc. Again, 2 minutes after the top of the hour. Welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Welcome all that just joined. We'll allow others to join us as well. Another minute or so, we'll give them the opportunity. So I'll start at 2 minutes after the top of the hour. We're glad to have you. Welcome. Okay, again, welcome and glad to have you again. For those of you who had joined me yesterday, my name is Odell Gordon. I am a technical trainer here at Sumo Logic. I'm based out of the Midwest here, getting storms right now, but hopefully my connection will maintain. My background, for those of you that haven't had a class with me as of yet, I have 30 years of IT experience. I started out in DevOps, then I went to database administration, and then ended up as a technical career. Thank you, Devin. Yep, Midwesterner, Illinois here. Yep. Um, Again, welcome. I am joined by my esteemed colleague and my manager, Josh Brothheim. Josh, would you like to say a few words?
Hey, everybody, just want to welcome you to today's session. As you joined Odell yesterday, you know you're in good hands. And so we have a lot of great content for you. And if there's any questions during today's session, I'll be manning the chat. So feel free to ask away. Thanks, Odell.
Yep, thank you, sir. So let's go ahead and get started, okay? For those of you that did join me yesterday, if you recall, I talked about and mentioned operators, and we briefly looked at some operators. This class is going to get our hands real dirty in playing with operators. We're going to have some fun. You're going to join in our training environment. For those of you that haven't been to one of my courses, we allow you to join in our training environment and play around in that area because we know the data. You're not playing in your production or your development environment. All right, so let's get at our agenda. Let's start this course, all right? Again, we'll do an introduction, objectives, then we'll just get into our labs. We're gonna search and parse and talk about some FERs. We'll do conditional and filtering operations. We'll plot objects on the map. We'll format our results. We'll look at moving averages, identify trends and outliers and comparisons. We'll then create an alert, something you did in our fundamentals course. We'll build on that and give you some more background on alerts as well. And then you have that opportunity, that 60 minutes to get certified, to take our Search Mastery exam, another exam that you will pass, okay? Again, I talk about passing the exam, and if you've joined any of our courses, we're glad to have you, and we want to celebrate you actually achieving your exam and passing it with a $15 Uber Eats voucher, okay? You'll fill out the form. I'll give it to you when we're actually during that part of the class, when we're doing the exam. I'll give you that link and you fill it out, and we'll email you that back, okay? These slides you actually seen before. I'm just going to go at a high level, just kind of remind you. Again, these are things that you can do within the tool. I'm also going to save us some bandwidth here and turn off my video and allow you guys to focus on the lecture, the slides, and the material at hand, okay? So as I mentioned, this slide, this is a high level, I'll go over it rather quickly. Again, you could build dashboards in the tool. We talked about this yesterday. Operational dashboards allow us to find out how our systems, how healthy our systems are any systems down, things of that sort. Mean time resolutions, okay? From a securities perspective, who's logging in and from where? If there was someone using has a root access, things of that sort. You could build a business intelligence dashboard. Again, finding out, we did a marketing campaign. How successful was that? Those types of information you can glean from that. And then finally, a global perspective. I want to look at my company compared to other companies from a worldwide perspective. So those are just 4 examples of dashboards that you could create within the tool. Okay, we talked about your data, again, getting access to your logs and your metrics. Again, whether they're stored in the cloud or mobile devices, wherever your logs and metrics are, we're going to have access to them to allow you to build queries. Our analytics, one of the most important things and one of our key points in our core values is we're in it with our customers. And when we talk about that, we're a multi-tenancy environment. You can see over to the right some of our attestments. We're SOC 2 certified, FedRAMP certified, HIPAA certified. So again, we take security very, very important, okay? And then finally, your people. We talked about this as well. You want to share your findings. You want to have a central location to collaborate and make decisions. And again, you can utilize our tool to actually share things, all right? So this is that continuous intelligence platform. That's that 500-foot overview. Some of you may have taken classes with John or Josh, and you heard this slide before. All right, now that data flow, okay? Yesterday, we talked about the data flow, and we actually built some searches and analyzed, okay? But the steps are, hey, we need to get your actual logs and metrics into our environment. We use collectors to do that, where you define your sources. Those collectors are going to encrypt, compress, and send your actual logs and metrics up to our Sumo cloud environment. Okay. If you want to learn more about the collectors, again, I mentioned before, there's an administrator's course you can take. We're going to spend a lot of our time on these last 2. We're going to search and analyze. And the key point here, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to expose you to those operators that I mentioned before. Okay, we use a lot of operators, and these are going to be great examples and use cases for you to kind of get your hands dirty. And you know, you can display your results in different types of charts that we have available. A good practice is probably to go ahead and put it in a visualization and build dashboards and alerts, okay? Because we know that looking at raw numbers can be overwhelming sometimes. Maybe a picture or a visualization is much better and needed. So that's our logical data flow. You get your logs and metrics into our environment. It allows you to search and analyze and visualize and monitor. We talked about the different metadata tags. You notice we use the underscore source category. That's the one at the bottom that's bolded. That's preferred and one we'll use most often in this course. Okay. All right. We're going to do the same thing we did yesterday, or if you've been in any of our classes, I want you to first think of your 3-digit number. And for those of you that went to class yesterday, you can use that same number, no big deal, okay? So think of a 3-digit number. Thanks, Joe. Put that 3-digit number in our chat. I want, for those of you that haven't been with us, I want you to actually watch me first. I'm going to paste in the actual credentials. Watch me first and then do if you haven't, okay? So again, you'll open up a browser. You'll type in service.sumologic.com. And again, you're going to follow this methodology. You'll type in training plus analyst. And then you'll put in your 3-digit number at sumologic.com. Okay. And then, of course, you'll put in the password, which is uppercase S for spring 22 exclamation point. So if you all, thank you for putting your numbers in there. I appreciate that. That's going to help me. Once you put your number in there, go ahead and log in for me. That would be awesome. And then confirm it by raising your hand. I don't want to leave anyone. I want to make sure everyone gets in. Okay. For those of you just joining, welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, you're going to go ahead and log in and confirm that you are able to log in. If you have any problems, please let us know in the chat window. That would be awesome. No worries, Horatio. I'll put the credentials in the chat again for you. Spring 22. Give others an opportunity to join. For those of you that have joined my class before, you'll notice in the actual environment, some of you may have tabs in there. Again, continue to let me know that you logged in. So far, I only have about 8 of you logged in. Confirm it for me in the chat by raising your hand. No worries, I'll put it in there. I don't want to leave anyone. The credentials are again in the chat window for you. Again, you can close any tabs that are open in your environment just by clicking on one of the tabs and going to close all tabs, just to kind of give you a clean environment. Thanks, Bill. Glad to have you again. Thank you, Heather. Anyone have any issues logging in? Okay. I'll put it in the credentials in there one more time, just in case. Awesome. So hopefully everyone's in. Just again, to remind those that, you know, this is your first time. Again, if you have a bunch of tabs open, you can close those tabs up at the top just by going to one of them and choosing close tabs, just to give you that clean sort of palette there. Okay. Just to remind you, if you came in and you see the Sumo Logic logo and then you see the stack of pancakes there, you can expand your navigation panel and you can hide your navigation panel. Questions? Okay, hopefully everyone's in now. Just a refresher, again, these are your folders. Remember, whenever you create an object and save it, it's going to be stored in your personal folder. Okay, I'll get rid of some of this stuff that I have while you guys are still logging in, hopefully. All right, now, you recall if you've taken the fundamentals course, give me a second, Yasir, I'm going to give you the actual lab information right now. Great segue, thank you, sir. If you recall yesterday when you, or whenever you've taken the actual fundamentals course, you were in the home tab and the learn link, and you were able to see the fundamental steps, and that's what we followed. okay? What you don't notice here is that we don't have a search mastery set of steps. But what I taught you yesterday, and one of the other trainers probably taught you as well, is you can get to those steps by either going to your documentation over to the right here. That's one method. Or one of the easier methods, and this is what I recommend as well, because you go here and you often will get information about your exam. So I type in the help sumologic.com, and here is our course discipline. So again, you could start here. Notice right here is our search mastery here. Okay, so if you click on that search object there, you'll come over to the left here, and oops, let's go start here. Let's click on the start here, and you want to go to your quick start labs and tutorials. I'll put this in the chat as well. Again, you were in the CIP. You either went to the documentation or you typed in help Sumo Logic and you clicked on start here. Once you click on start here, you can go to your quick start labs and tutorials. Here is our search mastery, and other disciplines, training disciplines are here as well, but we're going to focus on the search mastery. Okay. And let me paste that in the chat for you. Another thing I want to remind you of, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that may have taken my class, I also like to point out where you can get the labs and the video as well. Okay. So again, I'm demonstrating here. So back here on the CIP, you would go to certification. You would click on get certified. That launches our SkillJar app. Then you can go to recorded live trainings, ladies and gentlemen. Recorded live trainings. Once you click on that, you'll see all of our training disciplines. We're on the search mastery. So this actual course, the recording and the actual, you can register free, ladies and gentlemen. It's a quick click button registry. Nothing major there, okay? My point here is you can get the student guide, download that for yourself, as well as the slides. Odell, how did you get there again? One more time. Again, you're in the CIP. You're in the certification link. Clicking on get certified. You're going to the recorded live trainings and you're choosing search mastery, okay? You'll hear the 2-hour lecture video from my manager, Josh Brothheim, and then you'll also hear, be able to download the student guides and slides, okay? All right, so hopefully everyone's up to speed. That was that high level, quick reminder. Let's go ahead and get started, okay? Now, I remind you also, if you're in Windows, one of the things that you can do, since we're going to have multiple tabs, is you can right click on a tab and pin it. Okay, what that allows you to do is to kind of toggle quickly between the labs and the CIP. Okay. All right. All right, no questions. Let's go ahead and get started, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So then let's get on, click on our lab 1 search basic mastery and keywords. Okay. All right, now we're going to learn the use of metadata and keywords to narrow the scope and improve performance. Now, again, these are examples and ideas to kind of open your mind and say, okay, this is how I can use this. This is how I can use this. So again, let's kind of keep our minds open and get started here, okay? So you can copy your actual first statement there. Source category equals labs Apache Access. Highlight it, right click on it, copy it. Let's go back to the CIP. Again, we don't have any tabs open, which makes us have a clean palette. We're not overwhelmed with everything. We're going to click on the new button, okay? And we want a new log search, okay? As I mentioned yesterday, one of the things I could have done is once I clicked in the actual search area, I could have actually built this expression just by clicking. So if I go search and it's already has the equal, I can type in labs, and then I can type a slash and Apache, and I can just click what I want. Or as you all did, I could actually paste it. So whichever method you use, it's gonna work, okay? Also be mindful of, when you create a new log search, it's gonna look at the last 15 minutes, okay? Reminding you that you can change the time. We'll talk about that a little later, but again, let's go ahead and leave it as 15 minutes and run it by clicking on the blue magnifying glass. All right, so we start you out kind of slow with basic queries. You should be fine. This is something you've already done before. You see our actual status, the elapsed times, the number of results, okay? Again, you're seeing one of 310 pages, reminding you again that you'll have 25 items per page as a default. Over here in our field browser, over to the left, we can see that the time and the, I'm gonna go ahead and hide my actual, my navigation panel, just so you can see more of the screen. And I'll turn up my actual size as well, kind of give you a little bit more, increase the size here for you. So hopefully you can see that a little bit better here, okay? Thanks. All right, so as I mentioned here, again, you see the field browser over to the left, you see the number of results, and you see you have the ability, again, you're seeing 25 per page. You can always use the gear symbol, change your display preferences. Be aware, and this is mindful, you guys have taken that exam yesterday, you can export out from your messages tab. You have to go to the gear symbol in case that ever appears on a test or anything, okay? All right, so that was really simple. 15 minutes, we looked at our labs Apache access. Let's go ahead and build on that, okay? So remember yesterday I talked about the and, all right? Now, and is implied. I don't necessarily have to type this, but I wanna look for my messages with the 404s. So again, if I go back to the lab, I'm just gonna type this, ladies and gentlemen. You can highlight it if you want, but again, I'm just gonna type and 404, okay? Now, what that's going to do for me is that's going to search my Apache Access looking for the 404 messages, okay? Only those messages. Odell, would this work without the and? Absolutely, okay? As I mentioned yesterday, that's implied. So if you run it, you're still going to get the messages, okay? Again, we see that we have over 199 results. That decreased our actual searching. Remember what we saw initially before, okay? Again, we have 1 of 8 pages. And if we look at the first message, we see the time that the message occurred. We see the actual time with the stamp within the message. We see the actual status code highlighted throughout our messages, okay? Again, demonstrating how you can use keywords, okay, to help you improve your search results, okay? All right, next, we wanna look for errors or any items that start with the word check, okay? So again, looking at the actual lab right here, I'm just gonna add the error check, okay? You can highlight that and copy it over, or you can type it in, okay? So I'm just gonna highlight this, remove that, type in the and operator, type in the paren, because I want my error, or, and again, or is explicit, and I want anything that begins with check. Now, if you remember, ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned that this tool is similar with SQL functions. The asterisk is a wildcard. So again, I want anything that begins with check, any access message that begins with check, okay? Let's go ahead and run that as well. So you can see if I peruse through here, I have 1 of 5 pages. I have over 115 results. Again, I'm seeing 25 per page, and you'll see that checkout is highlighted within my messages, okay? Case insensitive, exactly. So if I were, great question, if I were to run it similar to that error, I still would get, or if I, let me change that to see, check, there you go. And that was a question on your exam yesterday as well, okay? All right, Derek, yeah, there's the actual credentials. Again, you're replacing the pound symbols with the 3-digit number that you think of. All right, awesome. And again, just to kind of post in here the lab in case you missed it, Derek. I'm gonna repost that for you. And there you have it, okay? We are on lab 1. We just issued a Boolean logic to search for logs matching error or check or checkout, okay? All right, so again, we're taking you slow. Hopefully you're just getting the, the feel for it. We're gonna pick it up a little bit here. Next in our lab steps, we want to, in a new tab, search for messages within the source category labs Apache era for the last 45 minutes. So I'm just gonna highlight this for myself and copy it. As I mentioned, we'll go to a new tab, a new log search, and let's paste in our actual code here, okay? Now, remember we talked about time, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday I talked about that. Again, if you wanted to change this, you could click there and you can see some relative times. If you haven't been in our training environment, you won't see recent, but if you have, you'll see some recent times that you've chosen. You also have the ability to customize your time, to use a specific date and date range. But Odell, this one says 45 minutes. I don't see a 45 minutes. Remember, I talked about this as well. If you want to edit the time, you need to, the actual syntax is starting out with a minus symbol, okay? And then we'll type in 45 because we didn't see 45. And we're going to use M for minutes. You'll use H for hours and D for days, okay? So we're running our source category labs Apache error for the last 45 minutes. All right, so again, we see the elapsed time, the total results. We're looking at one of 232 pages of our actual messages, okay? We can see in here the error is highlighted, all right, in those scenarios. All right. Now, we want to challenge you now. We want to search across both Lab Apache Access and Lab Apache Era, okay? So again, we can easily copy that by going back to our actual lab guide and highlighting number 5, okay? Right click and copy. Go back and let's go ahead and create a new log search and let's paste. So here we are explicitly using an OR. We're searching our era from Apache and our access from Apache. And let's go ahead and bump that up to 45 minutes. So again, using the minus 45 and M for minutes. And let's run that. All right, now, again, we see this time we have over 29,000 results or messages. We have one of over 1,173. Now, your numbers may not be exactly like mine, but that's not the goal of this here training here, ladies and gentlemen. The goal here is to kind of identify what's going on. So we can see within our messages, we have both Apache error, and again, there's some access in here. But that brings into play our field browser. You guys may have been looking at this and wondering for a while, well, what's the benefit of this field browser, Odell? Well, one of the things that we can do here is we could utilize, just by clicking on the name, the source category. The benefits of that is letting me know, hey, 80% of these messages are from access. And then there's the 19% from error. So what I did here was I exposed the actual percentages just by clicking on the actual field browser source category item. Now, be aware if you were to checkbox it, that would change your query, and then that would add it to the display. We're not doing that, okay? We'll talk about how these actual fields got here shortly, okay? All right. All right. And then finally, let's go and grab number 6 here. These are different examples of how you can search. Here, we're going to use a wildcard. Okay, so again, we're searching our labs Apache. Going back. And again, I'm just going to highlight this. I'm not going to open up another one. You can open up another tab if you like. I'm just going to put an asterisk here. Now, you can utilize wildcards here. So anything under the Apache directory, I'm going to retrieve. Okay. So again, if we run that, we'll get over 28,000 results. Again, we can see over 1,000 pages. And if I really wanted to find out where these were coming from, again, I'm using the metadata tag. So that metadata tag, I can now just click on that metadata tag. And again, I see my percentages. Okay. Pretty painless. Hopefully you're getting the aha moments. I can do that as well, just like SQL, similar to SQL. Yeah, good job. Okay. And lastly, what we'll do here is we're going to run a live tail for our labs Apache access. Now, let me demonstrate how to do that. Again, in your labs here, we're on number 7 here. Okay. And this time you can copy this expression if you want, and come back over to your CIP. We can go up to our new button and click on new and go down to live tail. Okay. Now, a live tail is the messages as they're being ingested into Sumo Logic. Okay. This is typically ran by an administrator. Okay. We have a governor set that you can only have 10 concurrent live tails at one time. Okay. So here I can just type in, just like I did before in my log search. I'm going to type this in just to kind of, give you the ability and the confidence level here. I'm just going to type in source category equals labs. Whoops, pardon me. Equals labs Apache access. Okay. Now, when I run that, I also want to put the, pardon me, I want to put the actual search there, 404s. Now notice in a live tail, as messages are being ingested, I don't see the 404s being highlighted, but there are 404s here. What you would do in this scenario, ladies and gentlemen, is click on the highlight and then type in 404, hit the enter key, and now those items are now highlighted. Okay, and yeah, I'll go ahead and put those in there for you. There's the actual credentials. Welcome. You're going to, again, use a 3-digit number that you've picked, replace the pound symbols. We had just completed or just finished up, and here's the actual lab guide as well. We just completed step 7 on lab number 1. Poonam, let us know if you have any issues. You can put that in the chat if you have any problems. Okay, so again, I was mentioning what you can highlight. Again, we actually put the messages in there. We'll see them. We went over to the highlights, and we have that available. Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone's confident and sure of that. All right. Let's go back to our lab guide. All right. So we have some questions here to kind of get you ready for the actual exam. And you guys can either shout these out or you can paste the answers in the actual chat. So quiz number 1, true or false? Keywords are case sensitive. Thanks, Fritz. Thank you. Yep. Again, you heard me. If you've taken my class, I always emphasize insensitive. So yeah, you guys are correct. Awesome. Thank you for answering. Okay. Number 2, and is implicit and or is explicit. Very good. You guys are awesome. That's correct. It's true. You saw me do that. Okay. So excellent. Okay. Number 3, keywords and metadata can use wildcards for live tail. All right, now that's true, but I want to point out something, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just point out something. This won't work. Okay, so we did something before where we saw the let's see here, do it like that. And it did work. Well, usually it didn't work there. Josh, am I doing something wrong here? If you do that, maybe that's what it. Okay, so yeah. So again, it's a syntax, so you can't just put wildcards anywhere. Okay. All right. So again, it is true. Just be careful of the syntax and how you use it. All right. Awesome. You guys are awesome. Good job. Okay. All right, so as you are aware of, again, in our labs in the bottom right corner, that will lead you to lab number 2. So let's go ahead and click on lab number 2. Simple parsing and grouping. Okay. This lab is going to teach us the basics of working with parsing, aggregating, and filtering our results. We're going to learn the basic parse operator and grouping our results for future labs. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and highlight the actual first step here. We're going to search our Apache logs, the access and error logs for the last 15 minutes, and then we're going to count the results by our source. So copy that. When you go back to the CIP, ladies and gentlemen, you can close all those tabs. So go to any one of those tabs and close all of those tabs. Okay. Let's go ahead and create a new log search. And let's paste in our actual expression. Okay. Now, again, we already said that we can use the wildcard. So that's in our actual expression. We're looking at anything under Apache. As I mentioned yesterday, you can pipe your actual queries to make them easier to read. I could, of course, had this on one line, but again, that can be overwhelming. So by using the shift return or alt enter, I create a new line and put that on a new line. I also mentioned that whenever you use an aggregate, it's going to initiate an aggregates tab. We're using the count. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and click and run that for the last 15 minutes. All right, so under our results, you see we have our initial messages tab, okay? And we have an aggregates tab. Odell, how is it counting by the source? You'll see that's one of our items in our field browser, okay? And again, we're leading you up to defining this field browser shortly, but just be aware that's essentially how it actually counted that object, okay? And that's how you got the aggregate. So I can see my Apache Access as well as my Apache Era, the account. If I were to click on the source, I get that same type of value, okay? All right. Now we want to update our query so we can parse the IP address using a parse regex and then count by the IP address, okay? So I'm just gonna highlight those last two lines and replace them. So I'll copy this over, go back to the CIP, and I'm just gonna highlight that last line because that's all I'm replacing and pasting, okay? And I'll add another line here just so it kind of looks, you know, kind of smooth on the eyes. Now, remember yesterday, or for those of you that are taking the fundamentals course, we used a parse anchor operator. And the reason we used that parse anchor operator was because we wanted to, our actual messages were all formatted the same, okay? But if we take a look here, and I'm going to turn off this here, again, another technique for you, ladies and gentlemen, to comment out, you just use the backslash. So I'm going to comment out these messages. You don't have to do this. I'm just demonstrating here. All right, so I'm going to run this here for 15 minutes. And I want to take a look at the messages here, okay? So for my Apache Era, I see there's the actual IP address, okay? Whereas for my, if I go down to my access, I'll notice that the actual IP address is in a different location, okay? And that's the point here. That's why we're utilizing the actual parse regex, because the location of the object is not it's consistent, in other words. So again, just to kind of recap here, if I look at this message, I see there's the client IP, all right? I'll see that if I look at another source, like my access, I can see that the IP address is in a different location, okay? Here's my IP address further over here, okay? So again, it's not formatted the same, okay? So we're gonna use a parse regex, okay? And essentially what that is gonna do is create a new field called IP address. It's looking for 1 to 3 digits, 1 to 3 digits, period, 1 to 3 digits, period, 1 to 3 digits. So it's looking for that format, which is essentially an IP address in both of our actual sources, okay? So when I run that, I'll see here that it has filtered out the IP address, no matter where it is, because I use the regex, okay? Now I want to count up those IP addresses, okay? Again, here's the field that was created. Now we're using that field to count, okay? And I can see the amount of messages coming from each one of these IP addresses, okay? And this may be very important where you see, wow, I have over 1 million messages coming from this area, and you know, I'm not sure. And we're gonna get to where you can plot things on a map coming up, all right? All right, so back here, we're now on lab 2, ladies and gentlemen. Step 3, we want to filter out those with a counter greater than 500 to display our results in a pie chart. Remember, I talked about if there was something greater than, a certain number, we might want to look at that and investigate, okay? So again, we're just going to grab the last statement here and copy that. Go back to the CIP. If you recall, we could eyeball it and go through the 2 pages or what have you. Okay. We want to add a new line, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So I'm placing my cursor on the count by at the end of that expression. I want to add a new line. So we would use, if you're on a Mac, you're going to use Shift Return. If you're on a Windows, you're going to use any other machine, you're going to use a Alt Enter. Okay. And I like adding 2 just to kind of visually see it, and then paste. So again, you remember the statement, we're parsing out the IP addresses, we're counting them, and we want our count to be greater than 500. Notice, as I mentioned before, the count, it's using a placeholder because this is an operator. You see that underscore count? That's a placeholder, okay? All right, so let's run that. And these are the IP addresses that we probably should investigate and find out why are it so many of these items. Now, as I mentioned very early on in this course is, hey, it's great to look at numbers. It's good. It's probably something we'll do with log, look at numbers. But it's also easier on the eyes to visualize your actual results. As I mentioned before, you have different types of visualizations. If you hover over any bar chart, column chart, line chart, etc., we want to use a pie chart. So we click on a pie chart, and here we can hover over and see our percentages display. We also have our legend over to the right as well. Okay. Odell, I want to see the numbers. This is great, but I need to get back to the numbers. Remember, that first icon will allow you to get back to the numbers. Okay. Odell, can I print these out? Can I export these on the aggregates tab? Absolutely. This first icon will allow you to export out the values, the numbers. Remember, I talked about on your messages tab, it's the gear symbol, in case that ever comes up on a test somewhere. Okay. All right. You guys are doing awesome. Good job. All right. Next. In a new query, we are going to identify the top 10 source IP addresses by bandwidth. This will require parsing the byte sizes as well as the source IPs. So I'm going to highlight this entire query and copy it over, and then I'll go back to my CIP. You can close the prior tabs that you have open, okay? Click on a new log search and paste. Now I'm going to demonstrate another technique for you, ladies and gentlemen, because I want to run this step by step, okay? Another technique that you can utilize is on my Mac, I'm using the Options key. You would use the Alt key on your environment. Notice that my cursor changes, and it allows me to draw a line before the pipes on all rows. Okay. Now, the benefit of this is anything that I type is going to be applied to all rows. So I'd like to comment out all those rows. Odell, how did you do that again? Great question. Okay. So again, what I want to do first here is I want to make sure that I have the options in focus. My mouse changes. I drag a line down. That cursor is blinking in front of all of the rows. Anything that I type will apply to all of those rows. Here, I'm going to comment out all of the rows. Okay. Again, we're searching our Apache access. I'll run that for 15 minutes, let the prior 15 minutes. Okay. Again, we're only looking at one item here. We could have used a parse anchor here. because our access is formatted the same, okay, with IP addresses. But again, in case this grows or changes, we use the parse regex in case we go across different sources, okay? So I'm running that for 15 minutes. Again, we saw this in the prior demo. We're parsing out. Notice in our field browser, the IP address has now become one of our display fields. That was the field that was created in our parse regex. Here it is as a column header, okay? Now, if we take a look at this message here, the next statement is, hey, parse, look for 200, and anything after that, the next object after that is going to be considered size. So let's look at a message. Look at the first message. We're using a parse anchor in this example. So it says, hey, I want to parse an anchor on this here quote. I'm looking for 200. Once I find 200, the next object after that is going to be considered my size. Okay. So I remove that and run this. So here, the tool is filtering out the size because we used a parse anchor and we located the 200 status code. The next field is my actual size. If you look at your field browser over to the left, you now have time, IP address, size, and message. Okay. Again, you have one of 197 and 25 per page. Okay. Next, we want to do some math. Remember, whenever you use mathematical aggregates, you're going to get that aggregates tab. So here we're using a sum. We're telling it, hey, sum the size as total bytes. So that's going to be a new column, but we're summing it by IP address. We've already filtered out that IP address, and we're going to sum it and get that new column. Okay, let's go ahead and run that. Here we see our IP addresses. We see the math where we're summing by that IP address. So this is the total bytes by IP address. Okay, you might have a governor set for certain areas that are log regions, and maybe that's over one of your governors. It's over 2 million bytes here. Maybe we got a problem. Maybe we got to need to look at that. Okay. Why didn't we use underscore size? Because again, great question, Jorge, George. I think if I mispronounced your name, I apologize. Again, size is not an operator. Okay, so when you use an operator, when you're doing that, George, thank you. When you use an operator, then you would use that underscore. Great question. Okay, did that help? Great, good question. All right. Lastly, I'm going to go ahead and we want our top 10 IP addresses by total bytes. Okay, so we're using a top operator. And let me just remind you, again, the purple shaded items are operators. Okay, let's run that. Okay, notice what the top does for you. It sorts it automatically in descending order. Okay, if you wanted it in ascending order, you could either click the column header or you can physically add the ASC. Okay, so again, by default, your top is going to be in descending order. If you wanted to change that, you can add the ASC there. Okay, all right. Oops, go back. All right, very good. Hopefully you guys are doing well. We'll take a break after this next lab. Can we add a percentage to the aggregate tab? So you wanted to format this in a percentage, I'm assuming, reaction mark? And yeah, you could do that. If you wanted to format the bytes, yeah, you could format that. And I'll paste that that actual formatting in the chat when I search it on the actual help. Oh, yeah, let's go to the bonus questions. Great. Let's go down to the bonus question. Find the average size by source IP. Okay, that'd be a helpful one for you. Devin, you give it a try and let me see what you come up with. Okay. Again, that might be also something on the test, so be aware of that. All right. Let's go ahead and continue on to our parse options here. Great. Devin actually put in an example there. Awesome. You guys are awesome. You've been playing around. That's good stuff. All right, let's continue on to our lab 3, parsing options. Did I lose connection here? What happened? Can you guys see my screen? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see what's going on with my lab here. Let's refresh this. I'm going to do a refresh here and see what's going on here. Yeah, sometimes you just refresh it and it'll do it for you. Yeah, there's bad weather, so again, it could be anything. No worries. I appreciate your patience. Give it a minute. It'll refresh and you'll be able to get it back there shortly. Mine is still spinning here, so I'm going to close out of that. There you go. Okay. So give it a time, ladies and gentlemen. Give it a second, and hopefully you all will get to lab 3. Appreciate your patience. Let us know if you have issues. Okay, we're going to continue on here. All right. Parsing options. All right, we want to parse our logs. Parsing our logs allow us to provide structure to our messages. So we'll be able to identify fields that are meaningful. You sort of saw me hover over in the field browser. This is going to kind of help you understand that a little bit more. Now, by default, that dynamic parsing mode option, and I'll show you that in a second, it's enabled, okay? Dynamic parsing allows automatic field extraction from your JSON logs, okay? This allows you to view those fields from the JSON logs without having to manually specify parsing logic. So again, ladies and gentlemen, just to kind of give you a big picture of where we're going. You saw us run queries where we use the parse regex and we use the parse. And that was to filter out those items as fields. Well, we have an extra bonus benefit for ourselves. JSON's dynamic parsing extracts JSON fields when you run a query at search time, okay? You're going to see those in the field browser. You'll see some hidden fields that you have, also JSON metadata fields that include because you are in an auto parsing mode. So let's first, ladies and gentlemen, let's grab the actual under number 1. Let's grab the query. Okay. Let's go back to our CIP and let's create a new log search. Okay. Now over to the right, you'll see the gear symbol here. Okay. Over to the right, the blue run, you'll see the gear symbol. Auto parsing is automatically turned on. Okay. So let's paste in our actual query here. Again, we're searching our CloudTrail logs. Okay. And I'm just going to turn off this here for a second, the count. and run this here statement, okay? And notice here, okay? Here's the benefit of that actual auto parsing mode being on. Notice here we have our actual field items here, okay? Notice what happened when we ran the query. We have all of those fields in our field browser. So we don't have to do a parse out and grab the AWS region or grab anything else. So for example, I see user identity, and here's all those values. If I go over here, I look for user identity, I'll see all those values as well. I don't have to parse them out. Well, Odell, I don't see the benefit there. Well, here, let me show you. If this gear symbol was off, if I turn that off and I ran the same message, look at my field browser. I don't have all those fields. So then I would have to start using parses and parse reg and so forth. So the benefit you're getting here is for those JSON logs, you're gonna auto parse those fields out. That's awesome for us. That saves me from having to do that, okay? All right, now we want to count by AWS regions. We can see here, we have different regions. We have West and there's some other ones in here. And if I ever wanted to, I could always come over here, click on AWS regions and see the different types. I haven't ran it yet, but I still can see, I haven't ran the count by yet, but I can still see the percentages of that, okay? This is how we're able to count by AWS region because it's in our field browser, which was extracted at runtime based off of that gear symbol, okay? So now I'll add the count and run it. Remember, when you add that count, it's going to automatically give you an aggregates tab. Now I can see here right away the actual messages from each region, okay? Source category labs at CloudTrail doesn't give you any data. Okay, so you ran it for 15 minutes, Fritz, and AWS CloudTrail, yep. Try running it again. And you are in our lab environment, I'm assuming. It should be labs, that's what it is. You have lab. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it should be labs. Okay, hopefully that works for you, Fritz. Yep, you're welcome. No worries. All right. Let's go back. All right, now we want to demonstrate the advantage of the no drop operator. The no drop option for the parse operator allows users to include messages in their results that do not meet the pattern. We're going to run a search for Apache error logs for the last 15 minutes, and we're going to look at all the messages. So let's go ahead and highlight this, copy it over, and create a new log search. Okay. And when we take a look at these messages here, we can see, let's see, I have error, and let's see here. Some of these messages don't have an IP address, okay? Maybe in public, we capture public IP addresses, but again, private IP addresses we don't capture. So again, maybe some of these don't have it. Now, the next statement in our actual query is going to go ahead and parse out. So I want to copy the, whoops, number 3 here. I want to copy under number 3, the actual parse statement. And I'll go back, and again, I'll add a new line and I'll paste, okay? So what this is saying now is I want to parse out client as IP. Now let's take a look at the message before we actually do anything. So the tool is using the parse anchor. So we're anchoring on a bracket and we're saying we're looking for client. Anything after client, I want to filter out. That's the IP. So again, the message is saying the next object after client is going to be considered my IP. But you can see right away, ladies and gentlemen, this one doesn't have the word client. Okay, so it's going to filter it out. It won't display it. All right. So when we run this, we'll see again where it reads client, the actual IP. Okay, client, the IP. Okay. Now we're just going to go and add the no drop to our message. Okay. And I'll highlight the bottom statement as well. And I'll copy that. And we'll type in the no drop. It's the simplest typing. Okay. So I want to copy that last statement, go back to the CIP. I'll go ahead and add the last statement, and then I'll comment it out. All right, so again, remember here, when we ran this query, it's filtering out where it reads client and IP. Okay. I'm going to add the no drop operator. Okay. The no drop is going to go through my original messages and say, hey, even though you don't have an IP, okay, there is again an item. There's still an actual message. So the no drop operator, again with the parse, says, hey, bring back everything, even if it doesn't have. And this may be a scenario where you might have missed something. So this no drop is going to capture that, what you missed. Okay. Now, if we look at our messages, we can see there's also a mod log SQL. Okay. So we're going to parse, use a parse anchor, the next object after the mod log SQL, we want to display that. Okay. As a message. So we created a new column called message. The tool is parsing and looking for the mod log SQL colon, whatever's after that, it's going to put in the messages column. Okay. Again, we still have the no drop on. So now we can see we have our client IP if it exists. And then we have the mod log message where an IP doesn't exist in most instances. Okay. So you can see the actual errors for those messages that didn't have a client IP. Okay. So that no drop is very useful for you as well. Okay. Lastly, we want to, or not lastly, but step number 5. We are on lab 3, step number 5. We're just going to highlight the very last item. Again, we want to filter those parsed by one or other statements by using the is empty or is blank or is no. Okay. All right. And while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and quickly bring up that help because I want you guys to be aware in case you ever run into this in some type of exam. I'm going to look on up the is empty. And again, it's good. It's a good idea to kind of be mindful of the difference of is empty versus is blank versus is no. Again, I'll paste this in the chat for you. You can always search for it as well, just to kind of be helpful as a resource. Okay. All right, now let me go back and grab that and go back over to my CIP and I'll add the where client IP is blank. So this is going to go through my entire parsing set and look for where the client IP is blank. Okay. And again, what we've done is we narrowed down that the messages of why it doesn't have an IP address. Okay, and then in most instances, it's because, again, it's probably a private IP as we capture public IPs. All right. Almost done, ladies. You'll get a break. Ladies and gentlemen, you get a break here shortly. okay? The parse field option allows you to do further parsing on already extracted fields. In this example, we want to identify the top 5 committers in the GitHub, okay? We're going to search the committers in the last 30 days and parse out the email address. We could have added a no drop. We didn't want to add a no drop again, because we're looking for the mod SQL, and our message only has those 2 choices. You could have added that if you didn't want to drop that. Good question, Casey. All right, so back here. So we're gonna go ahead and highlight, again, we're on step 6 here. We're gonna search our committers in the last 30 days and parse out their email addresses. So I'm gonna copy this over, go back and create a new log search, paste in my expression. I'm going to comment out the parse statement, and let's look at the actual message. So we're searching our GitHub logs for where there's a committer. So we're looking literally for that, okay? And we're gonna run that for the, I think it was last 30 days here. Yep, last 30 days. So again, I'm in my relative time and choosing last 30 days. Running that. All right, so notice here, again, we're gonna find, you're gonna see throughout your messages, committer is highlighted in those messages. So the tool actually worked for us, okay? What we wanna do here is find the actual email by going to and using a parse statement, okay? Oops, let me go ahead and add that. So we're gonna parse and literally look for a backslash, look for the word email, and then colon, and then we're gonna, the next object is gonna be considered the email, okay? So again, if I parse through here and look at this message here, I can find, here's my email, and it's gonna parse out this field here for me, and then it's gonna call it email, okay? Let's run that. So again, if I look at my messages, it found the actual expression, and then it categorized it as email, as a column header. Also in my field browser, I see it's a column as well. It's still processing, so give it a minute or so. Okay, and eventually we'll see that, again, it actually filtered out all of the emails. If you typed in committer, maybe it wouldn't highlight it incorrectly. Maybe that's why, Holly, if you typed it in, make sure it's in quotes as well, double quotes. Did it work for you as you ran it again? 30 days as well? Again, you're using Source Category Labs, GitHub, and Committer, okay? All right. All right, back here to our lab. Next, what we're gonna do now here, again, we're on step number 7. Now we're gonna use the parse field option to further parse the email address into user and domain. Then we'll count by user and identify the top 5 committers. So all I'm doing here, ladies and gentlemen, let's see here. I missed this. No, okay. I want to highlight the last 3 statements here, and I'll copy that. Go back to my CIP and paste. And I'll comment these out so we can kind of walk through them, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so again, we've already parsed out the field email. Now we're using a parse again, but this time we're using the field command to equate it to email. So we said, hey, parse email and look for the @ symbol. The object before is going to be called user. The object after is going to be called domain. So again, we're still using the parse command. We're using the field and equating that to email. Okay, and we'll run that. So if you take a look here and see what happened, the tool says, okay, I'm going to look at this here field called email. I'm going to locate the actual @ symbol. I'll parse out what's before the @ symbol and call that user. I'll parse out what's after it and call it domain. Okay. You'll notice that the actual order results to alphabetical in the actual results. Okay, so I use user domain in my query, but it displays it email user. There is, you could use the field operator to put things in the order that you want to. Again, just a FYI for you. Okay, so we're able to parse out an existing object. Next, we'll go ahead and count by the users. So we can see these users and their actual amount of times they've actually logged in or got into our environment. And then lastly, you remember, guys, ladies and gentlemen, the top 5, it's going to automatically sort it for us. So I want the top 5 users by count. Okay. And again, we'll see that in descending order automatically. We can see that this particular user has, been entering our environment more often. Okay. Maybe it's an administrator of some sort. Okay. All right. Very good. You guys are doing wonderful here. Hang in there. Okay. Next, step number 8, we want to use the parse multi option, which will allow us to extract multiple of occurrences of the same pattern within a message. Now, by default, parse only extracts the first occurrence. All right, so we're going to search our snort logs here. Okay, I'll copy both of those and then create a new log search. Back over here to the CIP. I'm going to close some of these tabs, create a new log search, and paste. Okay. Again, I want to comment out so you can visually see what's going on here. And I'll bump this up to about, let's do 45. Let's do 60 minutes. Okay. All right. So I'm running my snort logs here. Okay. And let's take a look at the message. Okay. So this first message here, I can see classification. I can see the first IP, TCP IP. Then I see another one. Okay. Now, this parse regex is going to find it. Okay. It's going to filter it out. It's saying, hey, 1 to 3 digits, period. 1 to 3 digits, 3 digits, period. 1 to 3 digits, etc. Okay. So it's going to do it what we expect it to do right there is to parse out the first occurrence. Now, we notice that this particular set of logs has more than one IP. That could be important to us. Okay, so we're just going to use the actual multi. All right, just going to use the multi. So back here, you can either type it or you can paste it, whatever makes you happy. Okay, and let's run that. All right, now the way to read this is, hey, the first message, it parsed out the first occurrence, the first IP address right there. Okay. The second message, which is the same message, but it's parsing out the second IP address. Okay, so it's doing that throughout this, and this may be very beneficial when you have these types of scenarios. Okay, all right. Lastly, we're going to look at the field extraction rules. Now, if you recall, when we started the JSON lab, I talked about that actual gear symbol being set and it automatically parsed out on ingestion. And the benefit of that is the actual, you didn't have to filter out, you didn't have to do any parsing. Okay, there was a benefit of that. Okay, now field extraction rules. Okay, they extract it fields at the time of log messages are ingested. Okay, we're going to look at some field extractions so you can just kind of get a high level idea of those. But let's copy this message first. Let's go ahead and copy under number 4, excuse me, under number 10. We're going to take advantage of the Apache access rule and run the search to identify the counts of our 404. So let's go back to our CIP and let's create a new log search. Okay, and let's paste in that value. Before we run this, ladies and gentlemen, I want to expand and demonstrate field extraction rules. Okay, so I'm going to expand my navigation panel, go down to my main menu. Remember, the darker shaded area is your main menu. And I'm going to go to my logs. Okay, inside of my logs, I can click on the field extraction rules. Okay, and it's going to display some of those field extractions for me. Okay, and here's one I want to look at in particular. Okay, and I just clicked on it just to kind of give you a high level idea of what's going on. So for here, it's enabled. This is going to be applied at ingestion time, and it's going to be applied to the source category Labs Apache Access. It's parsing out source IP, URL, size, and a few other fields. So you can see the extracted fields once we utilize this here actual source. The benefit, ladies and gentlemen, is I don't have to go and do any parsing because it's doing it for me. And we'll see that in our field browser. Okay. You would learn more about this in our actual admin class, in our admin class. Okay. Anyhow, I digress to kind of demonstrate at a high level. I'll go ahead and close that, get back to and I'll hide my my navigation panel, get back to my query. All right. So again, here, I'm just going to do the first one here just to kind of run that. We can run it in the last 15 minutes or so. And you'll notice over here in my field browser, these fields are automatically filtered out. Okay. So if I wanted to look at the source category, I can click on it and see, oh, 100% of this is the actual source category. Okay. And this happened based on that FER, that field extraction rule. Okay. So we are using the status code. How are we able to use the status code, Odell? Because during ingestion, that tool, the FER, pulled those fields out and made them part of my field browser. Okay, so that's how we're able to use the status code. Okay, and I run that. All of my messages will have 404s throughout. Okay. Finally, we want to go ahead and count up our SRP. What does SRC come from, Odell? Well, again, that was part of the FER. It actually extracted that for us. So if I click on that, again, I'm not checking it, ladies and gentlemen. If you check it, it's going to change your query. If I just click on it, it now gives me the percentages of where these IPs information comes from. Okay, and let's go ahead and run that. And here we can see the source IP and the actual count of 404 messages from each source IP. Okay. All right. All right. let's go over the quiz questions and then take a break. True or false? CSV, JSON, split, key values are all parsing operators. Good guess, Devin. If I didn't know this answer, ladies and gentlemen, what would I do? I would type in help, sumologic.com. I would then go to my, look for parse operators. If this ever came up on the test, and I would come down here and I could see the different types of parse operators. Okay. All right, next. Once a field has been parsed, it cannot be parsed any further. Excellent, Jonathan. You're correct. You guys are all correct. Yes, Wesley. Yes, Devin. That's correct. Finally, thanks, Jeff. Fields parsed by the field extraction rules are available in the field browser. You guys should be much quicker with that one. I just demonstrated how those things got there, but yes, you're correct. That's true. Okay. All right. I went over a little bit. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, ladies and gentlemen. Breathe, stretch, exhale, get out of the room, and we'll come back in 5. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you got a chance to breathe, stretch, exhale, get out of the room. Let's continue on with our lab steps. All right, in the next chapter, let's go ahead and look at conditional operators. Again, lab number 4, conditional operators. Okay. Let's go ahead and highlight this entire statement here and copy it. We're going to write a query that scans our Apache Access for the last 60 minutes and returns the number of successful requests returned, where the status code equals 200, versus the errors requests returned where the status code equals 400. So again, let's go ahead and create a new log search and paste in our expression. And I will comment out these last 3 lines. Again, we're searching our Apache Access for the last 60 minutes. Okay, and we're going to run that. Okay. So that parse statement, again, is going through the code, looking for the pattern HTTP, and then it's going to classify after that HTTP, we're going to classify that as the status code. So it goes and looks, finds the HTTP, and then the next value is our status code. So it filters that value out as that column. You see it as a display field. It was created right here. Okay. Now we want to add some actual conditional statements. Okay. If the actual status code equals 200, we want it to be true, that 1 is true. Else, false, 0 is false. And we're going to create a new column called successes. Okay, so it's evaluating, looking at that parse for the status code. If it's 200, it'll be true, else false. So when we run that, we see the new actual successes column. We'll see where it's 200s, it's true. And if I scroll through here, I'll see at the bottom, here's one that's false. So there's that 0. Okay. We want to continue our expression by using another if statement and looking at the status code. If it's 404s, we want it to be true, else it's false. And we're going to classify that as client errors. So I'm going to create a new column called client errors. And let's run that. Okay. So now we have 2 columns now. We're looking at our status codes and we're seeing trues and the successes. Okay. You'll see a false if it's not 200. And again, you'll get down to eventually 400s. And if I go to my status codes and just click on that field, I can see how many that I roughly have. Okay. So lastly, we're going to go ahead and sum up our successes, and we're going to create that as success count. We'll sum up our client errors, which remember that was the 404s, and we'll classify that as client error counts. Okay, so we can see we have a total of success to error ratio. Okay. And that was your example of operators. In your leisure, you can come back and also do an optional test your knowledge there for you. Okay. Let's continue on and go to lab 5 using subqueries to filter. Those of you that may be familiar with SQL, you know you might use a subquery to that inner query is going to populate your outer query. So in this example, we're going to use the child query to create our keywords, okay, in the parent query, okay? So if we, let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and copy both of these. So let me copy this one. So I'm copying the number 2, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going back to my CIP and I'm creating a new log search, but I'm also going to copy again, and I'll paste that in there. So this is my child query, okay? And then I'm also going to go back and grab number 4, which will be the entire query itself. Okay, and I'll add a new log search. So I got 2 log searches going. I'm going to toggle between them to kind of give you the actual overview. Okay. So if we look at this particular child query, it's saying, hey, I want to search my Apache error logs. Okay, and I'm looking for the phrase specifically, file doesn't exist. So I'm going to comment out these just so you can kind of see what's going on. Again, I copied the child query and the ending query as well and put them in 2 different tabs. All right. So that went through my actual Apache errors and found out all of the actual messages where the file doesn't exist. Okay. Now we're going to parse out in that message, we're going to parse out where we find the client. Okay. The next object is the IP. We're gonna capture the time, the error, and the IP. So if I look at this message, I can see the time, the error, and the actual IP. I'm going to parse those out into new columns. So it found the actual time that the message occurred, found out that it was an error, okay, and we found out the IP. So we have those 3 columns. Be aware they're also part of my display fields. Okay, now we want to aggregate. Remember that aggregation is going to give us a new tab, the aggregates tab. We're going to count by IPs. Okay, if you notice, these IPs are all the same, basically. I have 28 results, 1 of 2 pages. So it's just going to count them all together. Okay, so I have 31 instances, okay? And then if if I had more than one, this top really doesn't help in this situation. That top K would rank them. We could use an actual top operator as well. If I had more than one, that top K would rank them. But there's only one, so we could have used top as well here, okay? So this IP is actually what we want to utilize as a keyword. So I'm going to go back to our actual search results here. And let's take a look at this expression to kind of give you the actual results here. So again, we're searching our Apache access, okay? We're utilizing the operator subquery, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and take out all this stuff for you. All right, so again, we're using the actual subquery operator to actually designate that this is going to be a subquery for my parent query, okay? And it's actually utilizing that child query by filtering out the does not exist. Okay. Oh, I need to do it all. Sorry, I need to do it all together. It won't work with just that. I need to do it all together. I apologize. And there you have it. Okay, so it's utilizing this IP as the actual keyword by utilizing the subquery that we had initially in number 14. All right. So kind of going back to our steps here. Again, the actual format is your parent query. You're utilizing the operator child subquery. You're putting in the code, and then you're composing the IP keyword. So if I go back to the actual expression to kind of break it down, again, we're using the IP as the actual keyword there. Okay. And here's that final statement. Okay. So in addition to keywords, you can use subqueries, can be used in your where and your if filter operations. Again, there's more information on subqueries. I'll just quickly click on that and paste that in the chat for you. Again, this may be beneficial for you as well, where you want to utilize that. All right. Let's continue on here. Must the child query return and or statement as a parameter to the parent query? Not an or statement. I don't think it has to be an or statement. If you're asking, can you utilize an or statement, I actually pasted in there for you to kind of see the syntax a little bit more there, Roger. Okay. All right, let's go on. You're welcome. Thank you. Good question. Let's go back. All right, let's go on to plotting our clients on a map. Plotting our clients on a map. Before we get started on this, I want to give you some feedback here. I'm going to actually go to the geo lookup, and we have a relationship with Newstar. That's our vendor, and essentially you find out here how to actually plot a map. Okay, any IP address, excuse me, pardon me, Sumo Logic can match your parse addresses to a geographical location on a map. To create the map, the lookup operator matches the parsed IP address. Okay, so we need to provide an IP address. The fields that we're going to utilize are latitude, longitude, and count, but we have to provide that IP address in order to actually look it up in our Newstar table and provide that information. Okay, so again, I'll copy this here for you. This again might be something you need when it comes to plotting. There's other fields you can get information from. These other optional fields are available as well. The key point here in making this work is we have to grab the IP address. Okay, then that IP address Newstar will provide us by looking up in a table and provide us those latitude and longitude and the count. Okay, so let's go back to our actual query here. Let's go ahead and highlight our query and copy it and create a new log search. Okay, and let's paste that in there. All right, now, again, just sort of commenting out everything so you get the high level. And let's run this. Okay, just run it. So again, here, we're looking at our axis, okay? And we want to plot this on a map. In order to plot this on a map, we have to parse out the IP, okay? So again, you guys are familiar with the parsing statement. So it's looking for literally the quote it's anchoring on. It's going to find that quote and that format and glean out that information. So let's run that. So again, it found the actual parsing and retrieved the IP, okay? Now, let's take a look at this next statement, ladies and gentlemen. And when you're looking at lookups, you want to read it from right to left, okay? So we provided the client IP, we did. So it's going to look up in that geolocation table. Again, remember that Newstar provides for us, and it's going to provide us the latitude and longitude, okay? The key thing here is we needed to provide the IP address. Run that. So now it retrieved the latitude and longitude for the IP address. Now we're going to go ahead and count by the latitude and longitude. We get the total amount of messages from these locations. And finally, we're going to sort. Again, remember, you could click the column headers, but again, here's that operator that allows you to sort it in your expression. Okay, now having this now allows us to utilize this icon. Okay, before, had we not had the IP addresses or we didn't provide the count, we wouldn't be able, this icon would not be enabled. Okay, I did put in the chat the actual syntax and the help information on the geo lookup. So now we can see our information being plotted on a map. Okay. Just like you learned before, ladies and gentlemen, you know you can zoom in by double clicking and dragging to move over, etc. Okay. You have an aggregates tab because we counted. Okay. All right. I'm gonna, in lieu of time, I'm gonna go ahead and bypass these questions and keep going, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and go down to lab 7, calculating changes and moving averages. Okay. So the diff operator and the smooth. Okay. The difference is going to give us a difference of values. Okay. It calculates the rate of change. Again, another helpful piece of information for you in case this ever comes up on a test. You know how to get to it, ladies and gentlemen, as well. All right. So again, we're going to use that diff operator in our first statement. We're going to calculate the difference in the number of requests over the last 15 minutes. So I'll highlight the entire expression, make sure I grab the underscore, copy, go back. I'm going to close some of these tabs and create a new log search and paste. All right, so I want to kind of break this down for you. I want you to be aware of what's going on. You might be aware of some of them, but I want to go over them, okay? So again, you know we're going to search our Apache access logs, okay? We know that, okay? We want to render our results in 1 minute time slices. So that's that time slice operator, okay? Then here's one of the questions I think, George, you might have asked. Hey, notice here, time slice now has the underscore. That's because we use the operator. So now we want to use it as a placeholder for whatever's in there to count it. Okay, so now we're using that underscore. Okay, so we can see, all right, the amount of messages in 1 minute time slices. We now want to sort by, and notice we're using the ASC. We're hard typing that because again, the sort by would be in descending order by default. So we want this in ascending order so we can actually look at the count by 1 minute increments by time. Okay, so first minute, second minute, so forth. Okay. Now we want to use the diff operator to sort of find the difference between those time periods. Okay. And here we can see the first minute, okay? And then we see the difference. This minus this gives us this a number, okay? This number minus this number gives us that number. Well, Odell, why is there a negative 17? Because the second count was greater than the first count. So that's why you get the negative. Whereas the second count is greater than the third count. So you get a positive, okay? Now this might be beneficial to kind of view in maybe a line chart where we can see as sales goes up, maybe inventory goes down, okay? So this is kind of just a progression map, line chart, just to kind of give you a larger feel of it, okay? You can always look back at the values by clicking on the first icon, okay? All right, let's go on to the second task here. We want to calculate moving averages of our 404 occurrences over the last 15 minutes. Okay, so all we're really changing here is that bottom statement here. We're still going against our 404s. I better copy it all because the first one didn't do it. So I'm going to copy it all because we're actually using a keyword. Okay. And I'll go back and add a new log search. Again, I'll paste this in here. All right, so again, the first message for me tells me that, hey, you want to search your access and look for status codes equal to 404s. So I can go through here and quickly eyeball these and see that I'm looking at my 404s. Again, we're going to use the time slice. We want to render our results in 1 minute time slices. Okay. We're now going to use the count operator to count our actual error count by the time slice. Again, we're using the underscore time slice because it's an operator and we're using it as a placeholder. So we're seeing our actual error counts by 1 minute time slices, okay? Now we want to sort by that time slice in ascending order. Again, you still have your initial messages tab, so that's there for you, okay? Don't forget about that. And you have an aggregates tab because we use the count. Lastly, we're going to use the smooth operator where we get a rolling average of the error count. All right, so 11 times 1 is 11. You add up 24 plus 11, you get 35 divided by 2, you get 17.5 and so forth. You add them up, then divide them. Add them up, then divide them, and you get those values. Again, if we were to plot that on an actual chart, again, we could look at, again, maybe our sales and again, our inventory levels. Okay, so each point here is looking at our error count. So we can see the error counts as well as the actual rolling averages. All right. Let's see here. Let's plot that. It's better plotted on an actual line chart. I apologize. That's probably easier to see on a line chart here. So we can see our 1 minute increments. We can see our rolling average, and we can see any error counts above. So we can see maybe in that first minute, we need to find out, hey, what's going on? Okay, and so forth. Okay, so I actually display this in a line chart. Okay, area chart, pardon me. All right. Let's go ahead and find that needle in the haystack. Lab number 8, needle in the haystack. Now, for those of you that were in my class yesterday, we actually went over this to a degree, the actual log reduce, okay, which will allows you to find those unique messages to identify any reoccurring objects. So we're going to look at our snort logs again. Okay. Again, I'll create a new log search. I'm going to paste in my expression and I'll comment out, because be aware, ladies and gentlemen, we have the ability just to click on log search as part of our query. So I can always click it there. But here's the point here. If I were to go through these messages, I see here classification attempt, classification web, classification attempt. So what I want to do is I want the tool to find all the patterns and group those patterns together. Okay. So I could turn off my actual, clear the actual comments, or I could just click on log reduce. It's going to be the same thing. Okay. So what the tool now does, that log reduce initiates a signatures tab, and it actually goes through and finds those patterns. So I see over 760 classifications, okay, of this information, attempted information leak. Okay, I see 368 of those items. Okay, now notice here you have the actions that you can create. If I deem this, or let's say we had a rule in our company, if I deem this here as maybe this needs to be the detection of a network scan, maybe we need to bump this up as a higher priority. I could click on this here action, this up arrow, and promote this. So it's going to make it a 10, which makes the relevance higher. Okay. Let's say I don't think this is deemed as being as important. Maybe I need to knock the relevancy down by clicking the down arrow. So now it equates it to 0. So again, these arrows give you more capabilities in case others have to look at this and say, oh, this one is a 10. I need to look at this and find out what's really going on. So you have that capability, all right? You also have the ability to edit the message as well, okay? You cannot delete it. If that ever comes up on the test, you can't delete it, all right? You also have the ability to drill in and find out specifically about these 760 messages. So if I click on this, this again changes my query, and it's giving me the details of those 760 messages, okay? What if I looked at a message and I want to see, well, what happened maybe a minute or two before? So I can look at the host, click the drop down and look at the surrounding messages, a minute, a 5-minute or 10-minute increments before or after. I can also look at the actual name or the category, look at the surrounding messages as well, okay? So those are just some features of the actual log reduce, okay? I'm gonna use the same set of data here. So I'm gonna get rid of that message and run my snort again. And this time I'm going to look at the actual log compare here. Okay. And if I wanted to, let's say, compare this to, let's say, yesterday or any other time period to see if I have any consistent patterns going on, or maybe I have some anomalies that I can actually look at. So again, I'm using the snort, ladies and gentlemen. I know in the actual next lab here, it actually uses a different source. It's easier to kind of understand if we use the snort here. So again, I'm just going to copy the log compare shift 24, and I'll paste that. Okay. All right, so this log compare uses a time shift operator, and this could be adjusted manually, but I'm saying I want to look at the last 24 hours. So I want to compare this to the last 24 hours. Okay, and if we run that, I still get that signatures tab. And you'll see that, again, I'll have a top and bottom. The bottom represents the prior day, okay? So I can see here the percentages of change, okay? Also, be aware with the log compare, I could manually change the time shift, or I can go here and actually create a custom time as well, but just by clicking the down arrow. This is another way of doing the same thing, ladies and gentlemen, okay? Now, if I peruse through here, I can see, start seeing specific names here. And what these names here mean, like new means it wasn't there before, okay? And then if I keep going down, I'll eventually see something that says gone, which means it no longer exists. So again, this is comparing to 24 hours ago. We're doing a log compare to kind of find out if there's any patterns from yesterday to today, okay? And again, you'll see these actual messages as you start scrolling through your actual items, okay? All right, just a couple more, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost through there. There's also the is new. So I'm going to copy this is new because remember, we pointed out in our expression, there's some new items. Well, maybe we need to identify those new items and find out, well, why didn't that exist? Or why did it happen today? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and paste that. We're using the where and the is new function. Okay, and we're going to run that again. And now this will bring out all of our new items that occurred. All right. Let me bump up the time a little bit. Oh, there it is. Okay. So here I can go through and see all of these new items. So maybe I can find out, hey, why is this a new? Oh, because they came in from a different email address, new user or something like that. Okay. They didn't come in yesterday, they logged in today. So maybe that's why. Okay. So again, we use the where and the is new to narrow down the new items in our environment in a 24-hour time period. All right, let's go ahead to lab number 10. We want to identify out of the ordinary items. Hang in there with me, ladies and gentlemen. I only have like 2 more labs, so hang in there. We want to explore the functionality of an outlier operator, which allows us to identify events outside of a threshold. We're going to search our Apache logs for the 404 message for the last 60 minutes. We want to render our results in 1 minute time slice increments. Okay, we're going to count by our 404s. Then we're going to identify outliers outside of the 3 standard deviations. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight this expression here. And let's go ahead and copy it. Go back to CIP and create a new log search. Paste that. All right, so everything up to our outlier, you should be somewhat familiar with already, okay? You know, we're going against the Apache Access. We're looking for the status code of 404. We're rendering it in 1 minute time slices. We're gonna count by our status code as error count by time slice. So we're gonna create a column called error count, and it's gonna count by those status codes. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and run that. And we're running that for 60 minutes, Odell. So let's change that time and to 60 minutes. All right, perfect. All right, so we have our time slices and we have our error counts. Now we're going to use the outlier operator, where we're going to be able to get the standard deviations. The window represents the mean plus the standard deviation. The consecutive represents how many of those messages need to be appear consecutively before it turns on an indicator. And the threshold allows me to adjust the actual boundaries of my cloud and the directions you'll see shortly. So I'll explain those again, but that's just a high level. All right, so when we run this, we get the raw data. And what I want you to understand here, and let me change this here first. Let's change that consecutive to 2 here, okay? And let's run that again. So when I change that to consecutive 2, let's see, let's also bump my threshold down a little bit. Again, I'm going to bump this down to give you a practical example. I'm going to use an actual 1.1 there. Okay. All right, so let's take a look here. All right, so let's look at my line number 6 here. 10 is actually an indicator that it's outside of my boundary. So my boundary, my upper count is 20, my lower count is 10.3.1. The 10 fouls out. So I see it's an error indicator, okay? So it indicates an error. And to get a violation, let's see here. Let's go back. All right, so here's a perfect example. I went to the next page, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I'm looking at my error count. I'm looking at the upper and the lower. 22 is outside of my upper and my lower. So my indicator is on, okay? I have a consecutive set to 2. So in order for this to actually display on my upcoming chart, I need to have 2 consecutive occurrences of error indicators. So if I go to the next row, 11 is outside of my 18 and my 13. So again, the indicator is on, but now I have an error count, okay? So if we were to look at this and an actual line chart here, I can see that a lot of these are outside of the actual boundaries, okay? Again, if I change the threshold here, let's put it to 2. You'll notice that the actual boundaries change, okay? And I see I don't fall, that actual indicator isn't displayed, okay? When I had it as 1.1, the threshold, I was able to see and identify that second occurrence, okay? Now, this window value, again, basically the window, if I go back to my numbers here, that's how you get the actual standard or deviation. It's going to count up 10 items and then do the actual standard deviation. The consecutive, remember I talked about the consecutive. Consecutive says I have an indicator more than once, it's going to give me an error violation, okay? I use the threshold to change the actual width of the cloud. And then the directions, again, if I use the direction, the plus or minus, it's going to display if I want to know what's above the cloud, that would be the plus once I put on the actual line. So if I make this to just plus, I'll only see the items above the actual threshold, okay? So I see the items that are above the threshold. And of course, you know, the minus will do the opposite. It'll show you all the items below the threshold. Okay, and right now we don't have any, but again, hopefully that kind of helps you out there. All right, let's continue on. Let's go on to our identifying future trends. We're going to use the actual predict. Now we have 2 types of predict operators. We're going to use the linear approach, but there's also the actual auto regression approach, okay? I'll paste this in there for you. Okay, if you want to peruse that and read that at your leisure, you can do that as well. Again, we're going to use the predict operator and we're going to use the linear approach. We're going to search our Apache access logs for the status codes of 404 for the last 60 minutes. We want to render them in 1-minute increments, and we want to count by our 404s. We're going to use the predict the future to trend the 404s in 1-minute increments. So let's go ahead and copy that. Go back to our actual new log search, and let's paste this. All right, so again, you know what we're doing here. Getting our status codes, 1-minute increments. We're counting by status code. We're going to create it and call that error count by time slice. Okay. Then we're going to use the predict operator of error count by 1 minute increments. So we see our values again. We can see the predict operator is saying right now these are the actual error counts, but you'll notice as I scroll down, I don't see any error counts. This is probably better depicted in an actual chart. So let's look at a line chart. Okay, and we can see our peaks and valleys, but again, it's predicting over time that we're going to have fewer and fewer 404s. Okay, so again, this was a linear approach prediction here. All right, analyzing related log messages. We're going to use the transaction operator. Okay, this allows us to analyze related sequences of messages on a unique transaction identifier, such as a session ID or an IP. Okay, so I'm going to highlight this. We're going to look at our economark data. Okay, I'm going to highlight this entire statement here, and I'm going to run this for 24 hours. This would be good if I were, let's say I was in the grocery store or something like that. Me and my wife are in the grocery store. Okay, and I'm going to paste this in here, and I want to change it for 60 minutes. Okay, and I'll run this puppy. Okay, so here I can notice the state, if anything's were overshipped, to shipping, etc. But what this particular query allows us to do using the actual transaction operator allows us to actually utilize this actual graph icon, show and flow diagram. And I can look at my diagram and see, for example, if I look at my shipping, I can see, hey, we had 584, but 417 items were looped back. In our cart, I had 162 items. Outbound, I only found 5. So think of it like this. Me and my wife are driving. We're in the shopping center, and I put something in the cart. I turn my back. She takes it out. I put something in the cart. She takes it out. So this type of information can be helpful in that type of scenario, where you're actually able to see and analyze and find out overship versus confirmed shipping information. Okay. And then lastly, I want to also share with you, ladies and gentlemen, the ability to know what meaningful alerts are. We have a blog post that sort of descriptively defines what makes an alert meaningful. Okay, and I'm going to paste this in your actual chat as well. You don't want to get alerted for everything, every little scenario. Okay. And I'm going to go back here to my actual log steps here. Again, I will highlight the actual query. We're going to identify outliers. So outliers is probably a reason why we would want to be notified. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and go back to my CIP, create a new log search, paste that in there for us. Okay, I'll do 60 minutes. All right, so just to kind of remind you of what's going on here, we're looking at our access logs. We're looking for status codes of 200 or 400. That's stuff you're familiar with. We want to render it in 1 minute time slices. We have some conditional statements. If it's static codes of 200, true, else false. We're going to call that successes. If static codes 404, true, else false. We'll call that fails. We're going to sum our successes as success count. We'll sum our fails and call it fail count. And we're going to sum them by time slices. We're then going to get a rate percentage by dividing our fail count by our success count plus the fail count multiplied by 100. Okay, that is going to also allow us to utilize an outlier. I'll run that. And again, the goal here is, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to retrieve, I don't want to have messages all the time, getting messages for everything. Okay, I'll change my consecutive to 2. And again, we can actually better receive this in a line chart. Okay. And let me bump my threshold down to give you some actual points here, hopefully. All right, so here are some points here. Now, you'll notice that here's a point here, but it's not an actual, there's not an actual alert on it. That's because maybe it's not, it's informational. Here's maybe where I want to be alerted on, okay? Now, what I'm going to use to actually get down to adding some meaningful information, I'm going to add the where clause, which adding this line allows us to filter out only the outliers. So remember, we were using a true and false, a 1 and a 0. So anything that's greater than 0 is going to be considered an outlier. So I'm going to add that last statement to my query and paste that. Again, anything greater than 0, that is going to be considered an outlier for me. Okay. All right. And let's go ahead and bump that down to 1.1 for a minute real quickly. All right. Let's see here. All right. Now, I identified my outliers and things that are greater than 0. Okay. And I plotted it on my map here. Okay. On my line chart. Next, I want to be able to create an alert off of this. Okay. How do you create alert? Well, you go up to the query. You guys should know this that took the class with me yesterday. You go up to your actual query. You go to the save as. Okay. You can optionally give it a name. Okay. I can call it alerts, alert 101 or what have you. Okay. You don't have to do this, but here's the key thing here. I want to schedule this. Okay. Right now it's saying never. I can set up a time period. Okay. I can do it for the last however many long I want to do it. But also I want you to be aware and cognizant of the type of alert. Maybe you don't want to get alerted by email. Maybe you want to get alerted by a webhook that takes you to Slack or some other type of alerting mechanism. So again, we have all types of capabilities of alerting you. Okay. All right, so I want to keep this as email. And of course, you guys know I can go down to the bottom and also render this as CSV and save it. Okay. Oh, I would have to put the recipients as well. And you guys remember this as well. I just use something fictitious here and save it. Okay. Of course, to actually disable this, you can either go to the saved object in your personal folder, or you can click on the 3 dots and edit the actual query. So if I go to my personal folder, I can click on this alert, the 3 dots to edit it, go back to the edit schedule, and then change the run frequency to never. Okay. All right, I went over a bit, ladies and gentlemen, about 18 minutes. I apologize. Let me get back to my slides. We covered quite a bit. I know you're exhaling now, but hopefully you have some good ideas here of what some objects that you can do here, okay? Getting to all of this, and I want to get us to the point where it's time to actually take the exam, okay? All right, I think Josh answered most of your questions. Thank you, Josh, you're awesome. All right, so now it's time to take the exam, okay? There's 30 questions, there's 60 minutes, and you need 75% to pass, okay? Again, it's open resources, open slides, open documentation, okay? Now, one thing you have to be mindful of, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna show you this as I did before. Right now, you're logged into our training environment as training analyst, some number. Log out, okay? Because you don't want your certification to have training analyst, some number. So you click on that login credentials and you sign out. Then you log into your company's environment, okay? Just as I'm doing. Once you log into your company's environment, you will then go to your, let me do this real quickly. I apologize, this wasn't done. And let's go ahead and launch that. And let's do it again. All right. Sorry about that. I fat fingered it. All right, there you go. All right, now, once we get in there, we'll log into our company's environment, just as we did in prior trainings. And of course, you will go to your certification tab. Again, under the home tab, you'll see the link certification. You'll click on that. You'll click on get certified. You'll click on the get certified. You, of course, will use the search mastery discipline. That's where we want to take. Okay, and then you'll go ahead and start your exam. Okay. Again, I will be here, Josh will be here to answer any questions. I'm going to turn off my recorder. I'd like to thank you all for allowing me to present. There's tons of information. I did go very quickly in the last part because I want to kind of get everything in light of everyone's time. Good luck. Again, I'll paste in the chat the actual link for our Uber Eats voucher. And again, thank you for participating. We look forward to you coming to upcoming trainings.